everyone, Leslie Cornwell, Certified Nurse Midwife with Midwifery Business Consultation. This next section of the billing and coding course has to do with determining a fee schedule. It's a really important part of your practice. You don't want to charge too little and consistently get lower reimbursement from insurance companies than what you would have normally got, and you don't want your fee schedule to be too high, because then you're going to really be having a barrier of families choosing your services. So there's a balancing act of looking at your cost analysis for being a successful long-term practice, but also looking at what's your competition doing, what are other practices getting paid, what's your options for reimbursement from insurance companies. So what is a fee schedule? It's a concise tool that gives patients, payers, and regulators a clear picture of how every practice defines the value of their services. So my midwifery practice may value different codes differently than another midwifery or an obstetrician's practice based on my overhead, based on my educational background, based on regulations that I have to follow, based on the time being spent with the patient, the supplies needed, the overhead of running a practice. Each practice is going to have a different fee schedule based on their individual needs. There's a price point to determine these services by. It's by far the single most financial tool with your practice. You need to know what CPT codes, what services you're going to be rendering, and calculate each one individually, what makes sense for your overhead operating costs so that you can be profitable, be competitive, and show the value of your services. Creating a fee schedule is based on looking at all these things: a budget analysis, profitability, short-term, long-term, really spending time looking at your fee schedule. Updating it regularly is a really important part of your practice. So fee schedule considerations: setting that fee schedule based on basic business principles. What's your business plan? How many women do you want to deliver each month? What are your services? Are there going to be more obstetric codes being submitted for pregnancy and birth, or are you going to have more GYN office visit codes? Because that will affect your operating cost for each individual code. It's a lot simpler to cover the overhead of office visits than it is the unpredictability of a birth center facility fee and the time being spent with the woman, the labor support, the unpredictability of complications, and having that all equipment working and ready and available. The marketing your practice is going to be doing, it's going to affect your overhead. Are you going to want to be looked at as more of an affordable option for the families and take more women, or are you going to be looking at a smaller volume practice where you're taking more of a higher end population of the community? So you have to know with your business plan what type of practice. Your return on investment: if you have funding for your practice from investors, they expect to make money off their contributions, and you have an expectation of profit levels that the practice has to make. Knowing and being aware of what insurance companies pay for their typical in-network coverage. So for example, Global Maternity Care is CPT code 59400. If you're charging on your fee schedule $4,000 and the allowed reimbursement level is $4,000, that's telling you your coverage, your fee schedule is too low, and no insurance company should be paying you in network 100% what you're asking. It's typically about 60 to 70% on average, their in-network fee schedule of what you're actually asking you're going to get paid. Everyone is going to be different. Every code's going to be different. Antitrust laws and rules: you can't have a conversation with other midwives, doctors, hospitals, what they've negotiated for their in-network contracted rates. You can have a conversation about each other's fee schedules, but you cannot talk about, well, this insurance company pays me this amount and this insurance company for this code pays me this amount. Each midwife has to negotiate individually. The bigger your practice is, the longer you've been around, the more negotiating power you have. When you first in-network contract, most midwives are only going to be able to accept what those codes are, and you have to decide the reimbursement level with that fee schedule. Does it cover your overhead to be in-network or not? How to create a fee schedule: there's a couple ways you can do it. You can base it simple on a flat percentage of the Medicare allowances. A lot of the recommendations are figuring out what the Medicare allow for that code is, and then charge double or almost 3 times the amount. So for example, 59400 Medicare's amount's about $2,000. So that's where that amount of $4,000 came from. The other one, which is better for midwifery practices, is the practice cost analysis. So that was what I was discussing about knowing your services, knowing your overhead costs, knowing your break-even point. How many women do you have to see to make X amount? What's your profit margin? Are you going to be in network? Are you going to be out of network? What services are you going to be billing? And what is the typical charges? What is your competition charging for those things? And can you make money at that level? Leaving a cushion in your revenue for emergency account, lost revenue, outstanding balances, insurance takebacks. I've had so many times where it didn't even make sense that there was just money taken back from in-network contracted rate years later, and it's very difficult to get that back from families. Debt collection, if you have outstanding balances and it gets to the point you've sent them 3 statements, you're not getting paid anything anymore. If you send it to a debt collection agency, they take a high percentage of whatever is collected. So it's a good idea to have an emergency account, especially with the highs and lows of unpredictability of starting a new practice. So it's better to have your fee schedule on the higher conservative end than the lower conservative end. And then just making sure you're keeping an eye on it closely. So the cost analysis, like in this example, we had talked about maternity care being $3,400. And this is how I had calculated out. When I had given the first example of $4,000, it was based on 200% based on the Medicare allowable rate. So if you're doing a cost analysis, 3,500 would give you a little bit of a cushion. If you're going to do 6 women a month and you've got an overhead cost that you need about $500 per patient. You got to figure out what are you going to get on average for postpartum home visits, what do you need for a birth, what do you need for your birth assistant supplies, prenatal visits, what is your break-even point, what is your level. So I would even say, looking at this, I would comfortably want to get for most of my families around $4,000 for newborn care and all the other aspects included. And like I stress over and over again, every single practice is going to have a different estimation of their overhead costs. Your staffing is going to be different. Are you a solo practice, home visit, driving out of your car with no office, no staff to worry about? Do you have a receptionist? Do you have a birth center? Do you have a building? Do you have a loan payment terms? Everybody's going to have very different overhead costs, and that's going to affect that cost analysis for your fee schedule. So fee schedule do's and don'ts. It's really important to keep your fee schedule updated. A lot of people will make it at the beginning of the practice and they won't look at it again. Some people will look at it every year and say, okay, I'm just going to increase it by 2 to 4% to help with the inflation. But a lot of things I'm reading are every 3 to 6 months. You really should be looking at it, making sure you're getting paid what your negotiated in-network rate is from the insurance companies, that you're not getting paid at 100% your charges, and that you're able to negotiate, okay, this is the code I charge most of the time, and this one insurance company, I'm going to negotiate with them because it's paid way too low, but everything else they're paying me is pretty decent. So you really need to look at the right price that you want and negotiate to not be too high that you're going to drive patients away because they can't afford your services, but you also don't want to be too low that you can be around and serve, and you're not going to be burnt out because you're trying to take more and more women to cover your overhead costs, when your fee schedule in the beginning should have been that right price to cover the volume you wanted to serve. So fee schedule best practice tips. Avoid sudden changes in your fee schedule. If you're like, oh, I was going to charge $2,000 for my maternity services, and then all of a sudden you realize I should charge $4,000, that's going to be really hard. It's a tight, small niche community without a hospital practice, and families talk to each other really quickly. So if you're going to change prices, make it gradually. Every 3 months you're going to go up by an X percentage. If you feel like it's too low, but that's why it's really important at the beginning, just to get a good, accurate fee schedule that's realistic for your practice. Set the fee schedule and consideration with what the market is doing. If your competitors are all half your rate, you're gonna have to show what your value is and why you're different and what you're going to provide to them for that higher rationalization of charges. Make your fee schedule uniform. The more breakdowns of fee schedules you have, if you have a sliding fee schedule, you have a Amish religious-based fee schedule, you have a insurance reimbursement fee schedule, you have a Medicaid sliding scale fee schedule, it's going to get more complicated. You can do it as long as you have policies and you're not discriminating against why someone qualifies for one fee schedule over another, but the more fee schedules you have, the more complicated your practice backdrop gets. I am a big fan of simple with business administration so you can focus on being a midwife and caring for your patients. And that was that example, avoiding charging patients different fees, because if someone says, I was charged this from the practice and somebody else was charged something else, they may not realize that they fit the Medicaid agreement and this other person fit this form of a fee schedule. So when the public is small and people talk often, you want to have a more consistent fee schedule across the board the best you can. When you're negotiating contracts in specific codes, focus on the codes you use more often and the ones that are really on the low end that by negotiating will really help with your practice reimbursement. Always read your insurance contracts really well before signing and deciding to be in network. The fee schedule you pick is not what you're going to get paid from an in-network insurance plan. So if you say, well, I want to get paid $4,000 for your global maternity care, but their in-network rate is $1,800, by you signing on the dotted line, you are saying you're accepting that in-network contracted rate. So if you can't make your numbers work, you may have to decide to be out of network with that insurance plan. So it's all a cost analysis. How many women do you want to take? What other services can you provide that are more profitable? So based on RVUs and time for time, GYN office visits are paid more than obstetric maternity care. So some practices will say, well, I'm going to do a third GYN, but then I'm going to do 2/3 OB services, but then I don't have to push to get a higher volume with my fee schedule because I'm doing other things that are a little more profitable. So a summary of the fee schedule, please spend lots and lots of time figuring out each CPT code that you're going to charge, the price point for each of those services, and doing a good cost analysis based on your business plan, your overhead projected expenses, how many women you want to take, what do you want to serve, do you want to be in network, out of network? What is your overhead cost going to be to provide those services, and where's your break-even point for each service? To be able to be financially stable in this business aspect of midwifery, you have to have a current, accurate fee schedule in place that reflects your value and your true business service needs. Midwifery practice is a business and we should be treating it as such. We want to be able to serve women for years and years. We want to be able to take benefits. We want to take vacations. We want to be able to take care of our families comfortably with your midwifery practice, and that's really based on a good, strong fee schedule.